Live and direct, live and I take no jive.
Legalize it.
So how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, "Great, Barry, a reefer."
Welcome back to the Koala Podcast, and we've got a returning guest, Darren Gleeman from New York. He looks, as I were just saying in the preamble, much fresher than I feel at the end of the day in Jakarta, and I probably won't feel that fresh by the time we finished this conversation about. And I've got to get the name of the amendment right. The No Deductions for the Marijuana Business Act, introduced either last week or the week before, Darren will tell me, but in Washington by Senators Lankford and Ricketts. And I'm a big fan of Mr. Ricketts. He's like something like Scooby-Doo's evil uncle for me. So anyway, we can dive into it and sort of get a feel of this is one of many things that's happening around the States now, 6 weeks after the inauguration. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more little sort of niggling amendments, acts, decisions, statements about cannabis. I think this is the first big broadside. Darren, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back, Sean. Interesting times here in the world and definitely in the States. Yeah, I think with cannabis, originally, Trump was against cannabis. And then in the last couple of months before the election, he kind of was making statements which seems more in tune with what the country was going, which is, look, I have really nothing against it. Why would we be criminalizing it? Why would we be doing these things? I think when he started talking about rescheduling, I think most people have no idea really about what rescheduling means. So many people believe and a lot of the elected officials, that rescheduling is akin to legalization, which it's absolutely not. It just takes you from a Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 on this crazy schedule that really the two things it does, which is number one, allows you to research cannabis, which is actually a good thing. Let's have some solid research.
Except there'll be no government departments will have any money to do any research on cannabis anyway. So,
but there's no research for it. There's no money for it. Exactly.
I'm just teasing.
Exactly. There's no money for it, but you're allowed to do it. And the second thing is this onerous tax issue, which is 280E. So that's really what it's all about. And I think most of the elected officials have no idea. I think in this new bill that Ricketts and Lankford put out, I mean, they understood. They misled a little bit. We're saying, it's a benefit that the cannabis firms can have when you remove 280. It's an actual benefit. Which no, it's not a benefit. It's just allowing cannabis firms to act like every other firm when they pay taxes, right? So right now, cannabis firms pay tax on their gross profit, right, because of 280E, meaning they can't take any deductions. You can't take salaries. You can't take rent, legal, marketing. You're not allowed to take any of those deductions when you file your taxes. Normal firms, of course, can take those deductions. By rescheduling, it allows you to take those deductions. It just normalizes everything. And in this new bill, they said it doesn't matter if we reschedule from reschedule to 1 to 2 to 3. They don't care. Cannabis firms, no matter what, will always be hit with 280E. So, that's their line that they're drawing. And I do believe that, as you mentioned earlier, it's just something that they're just throwing this out there. Looks good for some of their constituents, which is what congressmen and senators and presidents have been doing forever. You put something out there, it looks good, and it's never going to get on the committee. It's never going to the floor for a vote. So you can say whatever you want to have. You can say whatever you want to say. A lot of crazy.
You reckon this one won't go to committee at all?
I think step one, it goes to I think it goes to committee, and then once it never gets out of committee, they don't vote on it. Meaning they put the bill out there, they're in committee. Here's a bill. Okay, everybody, here's the bill, but it doesn't go anywhere. It's not even voted on, but they still put it out there. So now we see it. We're talking about it. There's a lot of, talking heads. And right now, I guess you and I are talking head discussing, what's going to happen with this bill. But yeah, I don't think it ever gets out of committee at all. Meaning, it's never going to get to the floor where you're going to have the senators and the Democrats, the senators and the House of Representatives vote on it.
No, I haven't looked into Langford too much, but I have followed Ricketts over the years and sort of reminded myself of some of his thoughts about cannabis. He's pretty serious about not liking cannabis. This sounds to me as though, as you say, this might be the first shot, but I think he's got plenty more in him, hasn't he? And I would imagine, he would have been somewhere discussing something during that debanking committee last week. There's nothing public, but I can't imagine he wasn't walking the halls or had some of his people saying a few things. He doesn't want cannabis. He has been like that. What are we, 2017? I think it's probably the first time I came across any reference of him being public about it. He's not going to change, and it looks as though he wants to be he's not backward in coming forward about being, if he gets the opportunity to do something to restrict access to cannabis, he will.
Yeah, I mean, he is, he's a believer. And so for him, I don't think it's hugely political. I mean, if there were people in a lot of people in Nebraska that wanted to actually legalize it and he saw that maybe he would lose, he might change his stance, but I don't know. I mean, he's been against safer banking, as you said. He worked with who was it? Senators John Cornyn and Budd and also Lankford against the Safer Banking Act, which was last year and all the previous years, as you mentioned. I mean, he's against it. So, there's a large group of senators that do not want this to go anywhere. I'm not sure if they're going to do anything on the state side because, states' rights, but yeah, they're against it. It's almost like with these guys, it's almost the pro-choice, pro-life people, when you come at it from completely two separate views, right? It's very hard for people to see the difference. I think with pro-life, pro-choice, you can actually see it, the different viewpoints. They're really completely different angles. Where with cannabis, it's just a natural plant that people have been smoking, for millennia.
They're all in Washington. There's people on the fence, and there's, going to be a lot of private meetings. What do you think the chance of these hearings getting up before June? I mean, my guess is virtually nil. They said, didn't they, that they had to have a decision by March, was it, or the end of March or something?
Unfortunately, this is where I've been right. And I've been saying this now, it's just not happening. It's not happening. Well, what I said back in the day when people first started talking about rescheduling, like a year and a half ago, people were like, oh, it's going to get rescheduled. First thing, people thought they could do it very quickly. I'm like, no, there's an entire process, and the process takes a very, very long time, the rulemaking process. In the normal world, the rulemaking process could take 10 years.
Yeah.
And so it was pushed through to get this thing done by the Biden administration. And so they really pushed it through. And so you had the Health and Human Services. The first step in descheduling to get this rule out is they have to make a ruling. And the ruling that they made, which says cannabis is fine, right? They used a different test than they had done previous years when they tried to deschedule. A completely different test. So the Republicans jumped on that, said, this is a different test. You can't do that, but they did it. So there was already a little political maneuvering on the pro-cannabis side to get this thing pushed forward. So from the very beginning, it's been extremely difficult, to say the least. And then normally, right, the HHS says, I want to reschedule. Great. It goes to the DEA. And now the DEA is the one that says, okay, I agree with you based on the standards that you gave me. And yes, now we're going to go for the rule and I'm going to put the rule out. Well, that rule was never signed by Ann Milgram, which was the head of the DEA. She never signed that, which is just odd. So it was signed by the Attorney General. Again, this is something that just doesn't happen. So now that goes through, and then the elections occur. And I always said, depending on the election, if Biden wins, this is going to go through, and it'll go through most likely before the end of 2025. Even if Biden won, Trump wins, and it's just now it's in Neverland. We don't know. We have to see. And right now, he has so much political capital tied up in foreign affairs, in the economy with Doge. He does not care about.
No, I mean, that's my
cannabis.
immediate thought. He doesn't care at all. And it's going to be a matter of him waking up one morning, isn't it? And thinking, I decided I don't like that, or I've decided I do like that. Or if he's suddenly desperate, but I don't ever think he can be that desperate to say that I need to get cannabis through for any reason whatsoever.
Never so, right? I mean, and in politics, just like in the world, even though right now he is by far, he's the leader, people are following him, right? You still have to be negotiating with the senators and the congressmen. And there are so many senators, as we were just stating, that are against this, that really are thinking about it. Ricketts and Lankford, they really are thinking about this. So they're pretty much digging their heels in the ground to something where I don't think Trump really cares. So if Trump needs something, this is going to be a quid pro quo. I need you to vote on this. All right, don't worry. I'm not going to touch you on that piece. So the rescheduling hearings, which, by the way, the hearings are meaningless. Not meaningless, but all the hearings do. It says hearings are not going to say, yes, we are now rescheduled, or no, it's not rescheduled. That's not what the hearings do. All the hearings do are they listen and they read all of the information, they compile it, and then give their opinion. Once they give their opinion, then the DEA administrator, the new DEA administrator, they make the decision, should we reschedule or not the administrative law judge. So being tied up in there is just a bureaucratic BS, just to tie it up, for whatever reasons they want to do. I guess it's not bureaucratic, it's legal. Yeah. But now the new DEA head is anti-cannabis. So this thing is not going anywhere. We are going to maintain being Schedule I drug for the next 3 years, or probably 4 years thereafter, until probably federal legalization. I'm hoping the next Democratic administration, or even the next Republican administration, I think we turn the page. So you're talking about, I think in 2030 is when I think cannabis legalization will actually occur, and then rescheduling will occur. That's what I think.
The political push and pull with this Republican administration with cannabis is things are going to carry on in the state legislatures. There's going to be your standard pros, your standard against. Will it survive in the form that it is because states' rights is a part of the thinking of the Republican Party? Or do you think, I get a sense that I hear language of the old war on drugs quietly, not that quietly, coming back into play. And we're in very early days yet, but everybody's on the move. There's new papers, there's new opinion pieces every day that you see in press around the country that's linked to anybody from SAM to other organizations. And I say we're really, really early into this administration. How do you see it playing out? Do you think there's a lot of excitement now, and then by the last quarter of this year, everybody will have moved on and really were sort of in the same position we were in November last year? Or do you think there's actually going to be the true believers who don't believe in cannabis are really going to organize?
Yes, let's unpack all that. It's a lot.
Well, there is a lot. There is a lot.
Yeah. Back to the states' rights issue, the first issue. Yeah, I mean, the United States of America is United States. So we think of this, I like to think of our country in your states' rights. We are 50 unique, separate countries. That's it. We're separate, 50 unique, separate countries. It was originally 13 that came together to form a coalition, kind of like the European Union. And so we have 50 separate countries united by the Constitution. And that's it. So that Constitution unites us by giving us a defense that we can defend each other. It gives us the ability to build roads across the country. It gives us the ability to trade with each other. And that's really what the United States is all about. And as we've grown, we've become more of a one specific nation, right? I learned that from going to the Broadway show Hamilton, how he came in and had Dead of the Nation. So we all, came together. But we really are 50 separate states. So in that realm, and I think the Republicans do believe it, and I think the Supreme Court is very much into states' rights, I think it's going to be very difficult to remove cannabis in the states. I think the only way to remove it is to actually have a constitutional amendment stating that you cannot have cannabis. Since there's no way you're going to get that amendment, I think what happens now is it will be the way it's working right now in every state. Each state can do whatever they want because they're allowed to do whatever they want in each state. It's kind of like by removing or overturning Roe v. Wade, it's the same thing in each state. Each state has the ability to do it or not do it. So I think the states' right issue, I think Democrats who are supporting cannabis will push that more and realize, states' rights make a difference. So I do think that's going to actually save it. And
my US political knowledge is fairly good, but one of the things, if we're stuck in this sort of status quo for, you say, could be up to 2030, and we've got the tax issue, which is a federal issue, but also you mentioned it before, the trade issue. One thing they can't do legally at the moment really is trade intra-state.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way that states can talk to one another and sign treaties with one another or create agreements that allow them to do that without federal oversight?
As a non-attorney,
Yeah.
There's always, you can always try to get around have these treaties, right? You can do a treaty between, the state of California and the state of Washington, and you can try to create that treaty. But then what will happen is it'll go to a judge right away. Someone will sue them. It'll go to the judge, and then they'll have to make their cases. If it's illegal federally, I think crossing the border of the state is where federal comes along. Once you cross it. So once you cross that, now the feds come in. If it's illegal federally, then no. But they might be able to come across something. I've thought of something, if you go into space
and then drop
send a rocket into space and then drop it down in your space.
It's going to be expensive weed.
It's going to be super, super expensive weed. But, some of these states, let's say once you legalize cannabis and it becomes legalized in 2030, well, what happens to all these states where they have a lot of these grow places that's cost them so much to grow because they're not in the climate to be growing? Everything should be coming from, the states, the breadbasket where they can actually produce a lot of this. So a lot of companies are going to go out of business after it becomes federally legalized, which means the states at that point are going to become more protective because they don't want to lose the business. So there's so many different things that will happen once it does become federally legal. But in terms of that great question, can you figure out a way? I don't know. I mean, that's.
Yeah, I mean, I know, for example, that Oregon have, they've pre-written some legislation to wait for something to happen. Obviously, for the weed to fall out of space, as you say. But really, that's, that's now, I think, 3 or 4 years old, that piece of legislation, and it's not a conversation people seem to be revisiting, but. You would have thought I got the impression people got overexcited last year because they thought, okay, maybe something's going to happen with this rescheduling and that will allow us to have other conversations towards the end of 2025. But I presume most people in the industry now are getting pretty realistic about the reality of remaining in a status quo that either improves or doesn't improve depending which state you're in.
Yeah. And as time passes, 2026, 2027, if the money leaves, meaning you're not going to donate to the political camps, even the Democrats, they're not going to care. I mean, it's just not something becomes a big issue because money makes it a big issue.
Yeah.
If there's no money to make it a big issue, for instance, like Schumer's been a proponent of cannabis for a while. I have to assume he's getting donations from certain people to give him the right, impetus to speak. If that dries up, he's not going to care. And again, no one is going to die on the hill for cannabis right now. So I think you have the remnants right now, people talking about it, but I just think as time goes by, it's going to, for both sides, it's just going to pretty much drop. And then if there's money again that comes into it, right? The reason why, right, there was huge amounts of money that came into this, 5 years ago, right? 5, 6 years ago, tons of money. And when tons of money come in, the politicians come out. And yeah, of course they want it because they're going to make a lot more money from it. So they want to get it. But now with the Trump administration in not really caring, and on the negative side, like I don't understand, like on the negative side of cannabis, like who's funding that? Like this Sam.
Well, neither do I, but people are. I mean, obviously, there's money coming from somewhere. I mean,
Somewhere.
I presume it's faith-based organizations and people who just, that's their thing. Why you'd want to throw millions of dollars after that, I don't know. But
well, I'll
some
tell
people
you
have a lot
where,
more money
actually.
than me.
I'll tell you where you would do it. The hemp industry they would throw it. They would throw the no. Oh no, I guess they'd want to just keep it where it is. I mean, because hemp is crazy. Hemp legalizes everything.
Well, it seems to me there's more people in the cannabis industry throwing money at it to try and get rid of hemp at the moment.
So try to get rid of hemp, yeah.
Yeah, I just wrote a piece about that in my newsletter today. Because mysteriously in California, Senator Wiener came up with a piece of legislation at the same time a new report came out with a couple of companies and a big rather useless union all joining together. So you can hear the wish wash of power and money in that discussion happening in the California legislature. Somewhere somebody's spending more money than somebody else.
Yeah, like the state of Idaho. Like Idaho is a state, and it's out west, and they're not a cannabis state. They're anti-cannabis. Well, who is going to be funding the anti-cannabis side in Idaho? The surrounding states. Of course, the surrounding states, because if I have my dispensaries on the border of Idaho,
I'm going to be making good money.
I'm making good money. If Idaho becomes legal, I lose all of them. So I will spend tons of money to be anti-cannabis in Idaho. It is just following the money. It's not even like there's good guys and bad guys here. It really is just following that money. And then you do have the real, like Ricketts, who really is just anti-cannabis. So, and right now since he's so real and passionate about it, he wins the day. But to the original conversation, I don't think he's going to push it into committee and give up political capital for something else just to get it through committee to the floor. Because on the floor, they're never going to put it on the floor either.
You're in New York. Let's have a quick dive into New York. To me, at the moment, it feels like the patting oneself on the back before the fall. Everybody's so obsessed with how much money they're making. And I've seen the pattern before in other states when people keep saying how fantastic they are. Suddenly, the little green gold rush begins to slow down a bit because they've still got a lot more licenses to issue for retail. So people are going to start getting squeezed towards the end of this year, and all this from the OCM, how wonderful we are, how we're completely amazing. It's going to start to dry up, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's like Fast and Furious in New York. So in New York City, like last summer, I mean, it was the illegal shops were everywhere, like 2, 3 to a block, selling cannabis, selling hemp, selling psilocybin shrooms, selling candy bars. I mean, really could get anything in these stores. And so why would I, as a regular customer, go to a regulated cannabis company, which I have no idea what it is anyway? Like, I can't tell the difference as a regular consumer. But most people have no idea. You just go in, you assume it's just because you would have these shops called cannabis dispensary. I mean, it's right there.
Yeah, and it's in front of you. And if you're visiting town, you're going to go in what you see.
It's a cannabis dispensary. I mean, how is it possible? Well, then finally they shut them down.
Are they
which
all gone?
now
Are they all gone?
they are pretty much all gone now in the
Oh,
city. They're
really?
all
That
gone.
quick, was it?
Yeah, yeah, they're gone. Which I don't understand either, because if they're just selling hemp, they're allowed to sell hemp. And you have the smoke shops, so the smoke shops aren't gone, but they're not advertising, cannabis.
I presume it's under the counter still, though.
It's probably still under the counter, but literally on my block, I could go to this bagel store, and so the bagel store has next door to it, they have like a little coffee shop, like it's a coffee shop that you walk into, and so you walk into the coffee shop, and you go to the left to the coffee, and then to the right is a little window, and I never realized what's this window, and then the window is they're selling cannabis, illegally.
It's
They're
a
selling
classic
cannabis.
it's a classic New York window back from the 80s, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's like fun. Oh, but yeah, so most of those are gone. So now the legal cannabis stores have taken over, so now they are getting more crowded, and so yeah, you have that upswing going up, 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 up. But you're right, just like every other state, as it goes up, then more competition comes in, and it gets more saturated, and then it starts coming down, and people don't realize that that's going to happen, even though historically it's happened in every single other state. So,
And
yeah,
I would
there's
imagine
always a reckoning.
the fall is going to be harder in New York because the rents are higher, the costs to get stuff to your store, everything. I mean, everything costs more money in New York, doesn't it? So, I mean,
Yeah.
when the fall comes, it's going to come hard, and there's going to be a lot of people. I mean, as we know, New Yorkers can fight over anything. So, it's going to be a little bit ugly towards the end of the year, I think.
So you think at the end of you think it's going to happen that quickly by the end of this year? Wow, yeah, that could get ugly. Yeah, I mean, New York City has, I think, what, 12 million people, so it's a lot. And I don't think there's a very large shop opening up in Times Square, which you have. If you're a tourist in New York, if you're a tourist in the United States, what you want to do is you want to somehow end in Times Square. It's a place I don't go near, right?
It's
Because
horrible.
it is like, it's hard. It's yes,
Horrible.
it's
Can't
horrible.
stand the place.
It's horrible. And I like when people come to New York City, they visit and they go to Times Square and they visit all this, like, yeah, I mean, and they're being kind. They're like, oh, you live in New York City. Me, I don't know if I could live there because it's so crowded and noisy. I'm like, yeah, because that's where you're visiting. The densest part of the entire universe is right in Times Square.
But I mean, in New York, I presume there's a lot of delivery business. How many official delivery businesses are there? But they had the delivery business sorted out 30 years ago in New York. So in terms of locals getting their product, I mean, not much has changed over the last 20 years. And I presume you can open as many bloody dispensaries as you like, but it's all about delivery. And a lot of people get good product from their delivery people anyway.
I don't know how the delivery system works, and how it used to be when it was illegal. You'd call your delivery guy, and
When I lived in New York, I had a great delivery guy. He was 5 minutes.
That's right. And he comes over and he takes out his knapsack and he says,
Yeah.
I have this Mookie Lukey or this
Yeah,
Wowie Dowie and do this, the whole thing. And he's like a cool, chill dude. And then you give him the money and, then he leaves and he's just an awesome guy. And now I don't know how the delivery works, but I imagine it's more like getting my food delivered, but they probably deliver it. They give it to the doorman and then I have to pick it up from the doorman.